This is Tabletop Babble, and I'm Amber. Today on the show, I chatted with roleplayer, game master, streamer, and podcaster Bee Zelda. You may know them from the all-woman and non-binary D&D podcast, The Broadswords, or perhaps Roll20's Indie Showcase, or maybe one of the other many actual play streams and podcasts they've played in or guested on. And if you haven't yet, do yourself a favor and check them out. We sat down on February 25th and chatted about The Broadswords, growing as a person, a player, and a GM, and we also tried to not to turn this episode into an anime podcast, and it was just only a little difficult. Hello, and welcome, Bee, to Tabletop Babble.
Ooh, thank you for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm so excited. I've been meaning to get you on the show for a while, since we've been playing games together for a little bit now.
Over a year.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. My memory of our first game together was Ryutama at Akatacon 2019.
Yeah.
Those were good memories we made.
Yes, they were. But for my listeners, would you mind introducing yourself, like who you are, what you do in the space?
Yeah. So hello, I am Bee Zelda. I am a non-binary Canadian podcaster, streamer, content creator, producer. I watch a lot of anime. I don't know if that really counts towards my resume, but yeah, I do a handful of things in the tabletop community. Tried writing once, found out I don't have the attention span for it, but I've dabbled in a lot of things within the tabletop space.
Anime is always related to TTRPGs.
Honestly,
I'm just gonna say it right now. That's like where I get almost all of my inspiration for characters, for story arcs.
Everything. It's the reason, like, I'm on a bit of a kick right now where I want to play a character that has a mech suit. And I've been watching a couple Gundam animes, and I want a mech suit, and I don't know what games properly facilitate that.
Okay, one, Beam Saber.
I need somebody to play it with.
Okay. I will talk with... So I'm going to drop this now. I don't know if Josh, my GM, cares if I announce it or whatever, but we're looking at doing Beam Saber for Tales from Mox Ferry. So maybe there's a guest spot opportunity where you can live out your mech dreams in our ongoing campaign. So
Please.
We'll see.
Oh my gosh.
That'd be great. Well, first off, now I want to talk about anime. You've dumped anime on me.
Sorry. I'm watching a really good one called Wonder Egg. We could talk about it later.
Okay. We'll that's for the other podcast. The 500 podcasts that I make. But specifically TTRPG stuff, I tend to always ask this of the people who come on the show, and I'm interested, how did you get started playing RPGs?
I have a very non-traditional, slightly traditional story. So my first RPG, like most folks, was Dungeons & Dragons. And the first way that I was kind of able to absorb that media was through the Adventure Zone. Also, the very first podcast I'd ever listened to, I'm like, I know what podcasts are. Those are those things that exist on, like, iPhones. I don't have an iPhone. I'm cooler than podcasts. Yeah, no. There was a bit of a growth that had to be happened there. But yeah, so it was just the Adventure Zone. And then I found a group of friends in an online bodybuilding Facebook page for women at the time. And through that group, like, smaller subgroups were created, and there was a group for, like, fitness nerds. And so I found a small group of people in there who also were listening to the Adventure Zone. So we were all like, why don't we try and play our own game? It didn't go great, the first one. It was Star Wars, Edge of the Empire. I think that's the module. Yeah, that sounds like a thing. We didn't play any more than one session. We did our best, but that wasn't like the best experience. However, Victoria Rogers at the time, she was GMing that. She kind of nitpicked one or two players, and she was like, I think you're cool. You have a nice voice, and I think you're really fun. And then she just sent us a Facebook message and was like, hey, I know none of you have actually played Dungeons & Dragons, but you want to make a D&D podcast and kind of be like as cool as the McElroys? We were like, yeah, sure, that sounds like a great idea. Don't know what we're getting into, but let's do it. And then 3.5 years later, here I am.
Oh, that's so fun. Because, like, well, there's, like, just so many layers there, right? Like, one fitness group, which is a great, like, you sometimes don't think how, like, the hobby circles kind of, like,
The Venn
Venn diagram of
yeah.
stuff. But I feel the same way where it's like you try your first game out and usually it's like, okay, there's only 2 or 3 people that really gel really well together. And
Yep.
sometimes, like that first time playing a game with people and you're like, I don't know about you. And it doesn't usually sometimes anything to do with them personally. It's just a matter of group dynamic.
Yeah, they were new people to me. It was a new game to me. I also didn't really know that much about Star Wars. I know it's a shame in my existence. But like at some point we were in a Twi'lek bathhouse, and I'm just like, but why? I'm just gonna go find some fantasy food and, call that my session. And again, like, this was even before we had to talk about safety tools and, like, what the expectations were. And I was just like, nah, I'm good. And that's, like, I didn't vibe with that person. You live and you learn.
Yep, you live and learn. And then you get a gaming group together and you make something beautiful for 3 years.
Right?
So yeah, tell me more about Broadswords, because I've only listened to maybe a handful of episodes so far. And I would love to hear more about the campaign, your character. So go ahead.
Okay, well, this was also the very first time we recorded was the first time I played D&D. Character creation was so difficult for me. It made no sense. Honestly, D&D didn't really make sense for me until like a year ago. I don't read things. I just show up and like do my best. And obviously that comes with its own hurdles. So the very first couple episodes are rough. What's the word? In terms of like player synergy, we had that immediately. All of us fell into these characters that we wanted to be rather quickly. In terms of being able to utilize any actual Dungeons and Dragons mechanics, pretty non-existent. We didn't know what we were doing, and it was all thanks to Victoria that she kind of made it seem like we know how to roll a dice, how to say, yes, I roll for initiative. Episode 2 was combat. I had not a clue what I was doing. I'm surprised we even survived that encounter. Like, rolling for damage, you have to roll for your attack, then you roll for your damage. That made no sense to me for the longest time. Like, why? But why? So there was that struggle, and when we all first started off, because we all live in different parts of Canada, we all record independent, like we're local. And there was like a technological challenge to trying to get the Broadswords to figure all of that out. I used my microphone backwards for the first 5 episodes. I didn't even know a microphone could be backwards. I was just recording like my voice bouncing off my wall, and like I sounded like I kind of lived in a tin can. Hurdles. But in terms of like the story, so much fun. We found out rather quickly that we could tell a great story together of these 3 travelers who have come together at this caravan for one reason or another that is heading into a city called Rashomon. Rashomon is the city of spirits and ghosts and all things that are creepy. It's run by a matriarchy of like super powerful magical women who wear super cool masks. And all the men, if they want power within the society, they become barbarians. And not a barbarian in the like I don't have brains kind of way, but like in a barbarian in a way that they have strength and they utilize their rage in battle. Like that's just like their main focus. They could still be like housewives and then like, oh, you gotta go to war? Well, time to be a barbarian. It's not their main MO. The whole story begins with, we all meet together at this caravan. We bully some of the caravan people. Mapri tries to help them unsuccessfully. And then we get led to this rock and have a dream sequence. Victoria is super, super a big fan of dream sequences. We have 1 every season, if not 2 every season, maybe even 3 a season. I'm not sure. There's a good amount of them. And that dream, we met like the spirit who was super pissed at us because reasons I'm not super clear on. But anyway, she led us properly to Rashomon. We might have had to fight her. I think we talked our way out of it. It's been a lot of years since then, but like that is the beginning of like the Broadswords. And then we get to Rashomon and we start to learn all of our duties, our purpose, the things that the gods want us to do. So like our wizard / witch, her purpose was to become one of the strongest magical people in Rashomon and utilize her powers. Whereas Mapri, she's taken in, that's the character that I play. She's a tiefling barbarian and she gets taken in by the Stag Lord and just gets taught like cool fighty things. And then our bard, Keela, she gets taken in by the Skalds, I guess that's plural. And they're just like barbarian-ish folks who also play music. So, like, our bard has the ability to rage, which is super fun. And then Rashomon sets us up for the journey, which intersects with gods. Mostly just a lot of god stuff. Lots of god stuff, lots of dragons. Bahamut is in there because I think he's the god of dragons. Lots of Raven Queen stuff. She's good and bad. She's a Raven Queen, so it's kind of up to your perception. Definitely a war. We did fight a war. Oh, we also released an evil spirit in season 1. That might have been because of the war or to fix the war. Timelines, you know?
I know. You get to play your own game for so long. So is it a mix of D&D lore and like a shared collaborative kind of setting as well, or is it mostly Victoria?
I think originally, because Rashomon I think comes from like D&D 3.5, and she had some experience with that, so she pulled the foundation for Rashomon and that lore to kind of set up this world, and then everything else has been built up based on her imaginings, I believe. Sure.
I was going to say, I will also confess that when I first started playing D&D, and I started it in 3.5, you know, I roll up to the table like you and just like, all right, I'm here to be a wizard, and I guess I'll figure this out as we're playing.
A wizard?
And also, I just don't know, like, a lot of D&D lore. I was recently asked about, like, D&D stuff and, like, my thoughts on D&D, and I was like, I don't really know much about D&D lore per se. I played 3.5 for 7 years, but if you asked me to go back to it now, I'm not sure if I could remember stuff.
That's fair.
And so I was like, so going back, like, now that you've had more experience, and we'll talk a little bit about that more later in the RPG space, if you could redo like podcasting and everything, would you have chosen D&D as like your platform for a game to play in as a podcast?
I have such a mixed answer. D&D is successful. D&D is a household name. D&D is also problematic, and D&D is kind of boring. So, on one hand, if I was given the choice, I would love to have played literally any other game. But I recognize that the majority of the success of the Broadswords is because we're playing Dungeons & Dragons, and because we can interact with other major D&D players in this space to like capitalize on their success, and it sucks, but it seems like that's been it's important. I don't like it.
Yeah, as I say, it's like such a personal thing for me. We did a D&D 3.5 campaign as a podcast for 7 years.
Dang.
And combat was a slog.
Yeah.
We hated recording combat episodes because we know it's not fun to listen to.
Mm-hmm.
And then also just trying to, you know, everybody was making a D&D podcast like 4 years ago, and I kind of like, Adventure Zone, those big names, like it was also the one that I listened to a lot. So yeah, but now going into your world of RPGs outside of Broadswords, you've been doing a lot. Let us talk about that. That's how I segue into a question.
Oh, that's great. So would you like me to talk about, I guess, like what games I've played? What I've enjoyed?
Like so you know, you did Broadswords for 3.5 years and it's still going, but now I see you getting involved in these other shows. Like what was like right after Broadswords, if you could remember, or close to it?
Well, I had a couple of stream experiences. So Broadswords, obviously, like that was like my into the tabletop community. Like I made that Twitter account and I'm like, I'm cool now. It still took some time. However, I was approached, of course, by like a handful of people. Like, would you like to be on our stream? Would you like to do this? Would you like to do that? I unfortunately said yes to the first person that asked me. And they, again, early times, for some reason, we just didn't do any safety tools. There was no discussion about the expectation. There was no conversation about what I wanted out of the game. So this very first streamed game that I played, and I think I managed about 4 episodes with them, our cleric healed people with sex.
Okay.
And I never consented to that, so I just kept all my damage.
Yikes.
Mm-hmm. And our GM, it became quite clear that he was slowly pushing on his weird fantasies onto the players. And, like, the optics of this game, they seemed wonderful. You know, there was a trans woman, there was a black man, there was myself, there was another woman, and the GM was just some white dude. So I'm like, the optics of this game seem great. You all seem, like, on the outside, wonderful people. And then I got into the game, and it was like, oh, no, this is awful. Is this what streaming is like? I don't want to be a part of this. So I backed out. I was just like, I can't do this. I wrote a very long letter to the two women in the group, and I'm like, is this what the expectations were? Like, I didn't realize this is what was going to be happening going in. And they're like, yep, this is the game. So I stepped back, and that was my very first stream experience.
Oh my gosh. Well, I'm very glad that you were able to pull yourself out of it. I mean, sometimes you get into that kind of situation, it's hard to be like, no, thank you, and then just keep going and being uncomfortable. Yeah, no, don't do that. Listener, if you're going to start a podcast or stream, you need to talk to people. And expectations are huge.
So important.
Because, like for us in our group, in our Tales from Moxbury, one of the players is a god of fertility. And in the system we're playing, it's basically we're starting cults or religions around ourselves. Cool. And the first thing we said is, if you're taking that fertility word, here are the boundaries around what it is. Your cult, every cult member or religious person has to consent to what it is doing. There's no coercion. There's nothing. And it's like, whew.
And there are ways to
have
do
that
conversation.
Properly,
you know, like it's safe. Yeah. You feel comfortable playing with them because you don't have to worry, you know?
Yep. Nope. I don't have to do with anything icky.
So it was a good year until I was comfortable streaming again. And I was approached by a network this time, like a Twitch network, to run. They originally wanted me to, like, it was a D&D network. And I'm like, I don't want to run D&D. Honestly, I don't really understand D&D. So they're like, that's cool. We would love to have you on our network. They had a welcoming package. They had documents and documents. That was when I'm like, this is how it's done. This is good. Mm-hmm. So I streamed a campaign of Monster of the Week for about 3 or 4 months. And that was so much fun. And that was like my first experience producing, GMing, honestly. You know, managing the game, managing my player. I got to cast my own cast. It was amazing. Unpaid, but, you know, as a first-time experience, I really enjoyed it. And it was on a network that I didn't really have to do any work with. You know, they made sure everything got uploaded to YouTube. I'm sure all of this horrible game still exists somewhere. I was so new.
Oh.
So new. But at that point in my tabletop experience, I knew to have talks with my players. You know, we sat down and we set up what the expectations were. At the beginning of every game, I asked, like, how are we doing? What would you like out of this session? At the end of the game, I didn't have a word for stars and wishes at the time, but we would do this thing where we would talk about what was your favorite moment and what would you like to see later. So that streaming experience, my community experience started to get a little bit better. I'm trying to think what I started doing after that. I think I had my first Roll20 gig where they needed somebody to demo a new game that was coming to Roll20 Marketplace called Until Dawn. And it was like a fun game about singing and like a battle of the bands, almost. And I loved that. There was very minimal combat. Your combat was like singing and like how much flair you can toss out at your enemies to like impress them. And that was when I was like, gosh, heck, games could not have combat and be amazing. And I went down that rabbit hole of looking for games that I could play that aren't combat-based. And there are so many amazing indie games. You know, I started utilizing the Broads channel and streaming the occasional game that I just wanted to run and share with people. And then it's been really good ever since. Like, I stream regularly for Roll20. I'm on a couple of different other Twitch channels, streaming with them on the regular, just because I've found people in games that I actually enjoy.
I really appreciate you being open with your experiences into the community and showcasing even that hard stuff, because I think more people need to understand that. Especially, I think, and this is just my viewpoint, like you said, your first D&D experience, you're recording it for a podcast. The first time you GM'd, you're recording it live for a live stream. And as a person who is socially anxious, And I did the same thing too. It's like the first time I ever GM'd, I'm recording it for a podcast and I have to listen to it.
Oh gosh, what's wrong with us?
I don't know. I just think we're masochists.
That's the word,
I honestly,
100%.
We like inflicting pain upon ourselves in this very unique and strange way.
Yeah,
a very specific way. Let me make myself feel very socially awkward and also hear all of my flaws. I'm okay with this.
How long did it take you to get comfortable with your own voice?
Gosh. Because I edited my own podcast to start out with, too. I think it was probably by, like, episode 10, I just stopped caring.
Yeah.
I just couldn't care anymore. Like, it's whatever. And, like, you start to catch, like, things that you say and how you say things and, like, your crutch words. Ugh, that's a whole thing. Mm-hmm. But I like that you're showcasing these issues that you had as a means to, like, I think it needs to be talked about more. Unfortunately, I see a lot of times people have similar experiences where it's like I go into because it's like, oh, I want to stream a game and I want to run a game with people, and most of them are strangers. Mm-hmm. Like, yeah, you know people online, but not really. It's not the same as sharing a game table with each other. And so, yeah, safety tools and that conversation at the beginning, super, super important.
At the center of the great forest, on an island in the sky, the crow, deer, and wolf clans have been training 3 fearsome warriors from infancy for one purpose: to protect and serve the goddess of Estra.
So how exactly are we going to do that? Protecting the goddess, I mean.
Fran lies down.
Leica can't answer because she's too busy sniffing both your butts.
Okay, back off, Wolf Clan.
This disturbs me, but not to worry, I will instantly repress it.
These are the guardians of the goddess. Leica, the tiefling paladin who hails from the wolf clan.
Nobody's touching one beautiful hair on the goddess's head as long as I'm around.
Corbin, a human druid from the crow clan.
Human! I'm a crow!
And Fran, a water genasi wizard of the deer clan.
So, like, is there a way to quit this job or what?
This unlikely trio will venture forth into an unfamiliar world without knowing who can be trusted against the powerful dark force stalking the steps of their goddess and threatening the future of their world. Tune in every second Monday to Dames and Dragons, a 5th edition D&D actual play podcast. See ya then!
I was going to say, with Roll20, it's the Indie Spotlight show is what you're doing now?
Indie Showcase, where I just get to demo indie games or indie modules that exist on the marketplace.
So what have you, if you can, I don't know how many you've done so far, but what have you demoed or showcased?
My all-time favorite has been Thirsty Sword Lesbians. Powered by the Apocalypse, super simple system. Like, I don't play games for the mechanics, I play the games to be able to tell good stories. And that was really when I realized the divide between what I want and what D&D can offer. So Thirsty Sword Lesbians has been amazing. I got to run Ross Rifles, which is a Canadian war story, pretty recently, told from the perspective of, like, the marginalized folk in the Canadian Army, how they were able to affect the war despite being stepped on consistently and used. What else have I run? Oh, D&D, but... It was a Kobold Press adventure, so I was highlighting the Kobold Press module, which is honestly, it was really nice. You know, I did like 2 clicks. It set it all up. It put the tokens on the map. It set up the map for me. It set up my layers, my lighting. Again, I often don't read things. My level of preparedness can be minimal. So that setup was really nice, but the game itself, like, D&D is so boring to run. Like, I had amazing cast. Like, I had friggin' Travis McElroy, and, like, as players, they were wonderful, but, like, trying to make the story fun when I have to have combat and I have to show off these roles and, like, these mechanics is just...
Not your bag.
Yes.
I feel you. I mean, that's why I have not run D&D at all yet. I probably never. That's like, I might try it.
You're not missing out.
But I'm probably not going to do it. Like, I don't have anything... It's a different... I will play D&D. I will 100%, if somebody invited me on to play D&D, sure, and if it's a wizard, because I know wizards are the best, I'll play it, but I don't think I have the mind to run it, if that makes sense.
Nope, that's very valid.
My question to you is, do you like running games more or playing games more? I know that's a loaded question. Or maybe you like both, but you like different aspects of them.
I think that's probably the best way to look at it. I like running games that I don't have to prepare and I don't have to think about. Games that, like, I can get my players engaged and talking amongst themselves so they can just kind of do their thing, and I just, like, sit back with my arms crossed like a proud parent, like, yes, go off and be great. And then on the flip side, I also love to be those players that just lose myself talking to the other players, and we're just, like, we were given the beginnings of the story, and we're just like, okay, we're gonna take this and run with it, and, like, 30 minutes later, we're still talking amongst ourselves. I love that as well. I lean towards preferring being a player because I'm lazy and I like to just show up, but you know, there's benefits to being a GM because you can control the story and like the direction, and like power is nice.
I really enjoy having you in a game. So I ran a rabbit game for you, the Warren of Petal Grove, which is all done now and up on YouTube. All 12 sessions are done.
Dang,
thank God.
Congrats.
I thank you. I loved GMing it, but GMing for me definitely has a different level of pressure where it's like I feel like I want to make sure everybody's having a really good time. And I read too much into things. Do you experience that as well?
Really worrying about trying to manage everybody's fun, and if one person is slightly too quiet, then it's definitely my fault and I'm doing something terribly wrong. Yeah?
Yep, okay. That's exactly it. So I also agree that being a player for me feels like a weight off my shoulders because I can just be my ridiculous character, which is what I really like about you, Bee. Like, I've loved all of the characters that I've gotten to witness you be. And I was wondering, was that something that has come naturally to you, or is that something you've actually been consciously working on? Like,
That is a wonderful question. So, as I have learned in the tabletop space, most of the people who do games also were theater kids. I would be out in the back not being a responsible student in school. So... You know, theater, just like I don't do well on stage. Public speaking would make me throw up when I was younger. I was not charismatic. Most of the time, people wouldn't listen to me talk for like longer than 3 seconds because they're like, I'm sorry, you're so boring. So like, I didn't have a lot of vocal power or vocal strength or like personality. So not only has podcasting and streaming helped me, but I've done so much growing in terms of being able to perform. And now I love it. Now I'm comfortable with it. Now put me in front of a stage or on top of a stage with like 100,000 people and I'll talk. I feel like I'm capable of that now, but that's an ability I never thought I would get. And I had to work towards it with tabletop gaming and like role-playing, basically. You know, play a character and discover that they have amazing qualities and you want to borrow some of those qualities because you just tested them out. And you're like, well, I can do that. I just managed to do that for 2 hours. And then that in itself has helped me wildly.
I was going to say, same for me with RPGs. It's like the first time I was ever asked to describe what my spell looked like, I got so anxious and caught up and started to sweat that by the time that I was able to say, it looks like a dragon, and the game was over, I went to go vomit. Because before that experience, all I've ever said is I cast Fireball or I cast Magic Missile. And then I was asked, what does that look like? And it broke my mind.
Oh, you're asking too much.
It's not in the book. The book doesn't tell me what this looks like. Like, I could if I could find it, but I don't know D&D and I can't find anything.
Yeah, it wouldn't be in there. It's all on you, Fram.
So I think, like, for me, and I want to know if this is true for you, just that desire to be creative and then in this space has really pushed you to be a little bit more out of your shell, and to the point where now it's like, yeah, put me in front of whoever.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, I mean, from soft-spoken uncharismatic, didn't tell very good stories, to loudly spoken, very charismatic, and will share absurd stories without even being prompted. Like, very opposite, very polar opposites from kind of where I started off even 5 years ago.
So were you what was your creative outlets when you were younger? Were you a book reader, story writer?
Fantasy book reader. I would write a little bit as a kid. Yeah, a lot of writing. I always wanted to be a writer when I was a kid, but I realized most of my writing was just me trying to figure out my trans feelings, and it really helped. But yeah, mostly just I read a lot of fantasy books, like a lot of fantasy books, and that's helped with like that creative vibe that I needed, and a lot of those energies I've been able to pull into like what I do nowadays, because it was just like boys fighting dragons. That was all I read.
What was your number one series when you were a kid?
It's not a good series. The Wheel of Time by Robert Jordan. It's like an epic fantasy or a high fantasy, whatever you want to call it. There's like 12 books. The author died before the series was even finished, and like his biggest fan, who was also an author, like picked up the mantle and finished the book. Yeah, it doesn't write women very well. All the boys, one boy has like 5 women that are in love with him. Like, it just, and he's so edgy.
It's like a harem anime style kind of thing, which is not not the greatest of tropes.
I mean, anime also inspired me as a kid. I'd come home after school and watch Dragon Ball Z, so Sailor Moon, DBZ.
So then it makes me want to ask, of course, like the kind of characters you play, are they the same kind of characters that you like in media? Do you feel yourself emulating that? So then you're nodding.
100%. Yes.
So now, of course, I want to know and let the viewers. So now I want to know and let the listeners know, who are your like favorite characters? Who do you get those inspirations from?
Vegeta from Dragon Ball Z.
He is hilarious, honestly.
I just want to be an angry Saiyan, you know? I want to fight with the best fighter, even though he's definitely my best friend. Like, I just want that energy.
And he just makes these one-off glib comments every once in a while that isn't really a joke, but just the delivery is, like, hilarious.
It's perfect. So I channel a lot of my Vegeta. I mean, a lot of Dragon Ball Z characters I've tried to emulate. I mean, again, growing up, I watched a lot of magical girls, so, like, Cardcaptor Sakura, a little bit of that. I think I was a little too young when I watched Sailor Moon to like remember a lot of it. So it hasn't been like a main influence. Gosh. Now you're really making me think of like my childhood animes.
Sorry. My childhood animes are pretty much aligned because I think we're in the same age category, so it's like I think that lines up. So yeah, a lot of Dragon Ball Z, a lot of Cardcaptor Sakura.
Inuyasha? You watch any of that? Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, loved Inuyasha.
Channeled my best Shishomaru before. I loved him. I mean, I pulled from a lot of like recent animes as well. I've tried to play a character from One Punch Man. I wanted to play Mob from like Mob Psycho 100. Yeah, mostly just like boys who have powers. I've got a thing for that. I just want to channel them.
Yeah, I don't. It's so funny because like I'm sorry, Tabletop Babble listeners. This is becoming anime talk because I can't help it so much. And if you listen to anything that I do, like so much of the stuff that I make characters of or write about or like my campaigns are heavily anime inspired. But yeah, I think, what is it about? I always play boy characters as well.
I just think they're the cooler ones. Like, anime is obviously, it deals with its rampant sexism, but like the male characters are just set up to be cool. And that's what I want to channel. I want super cool powers. I want to shoot a Kamehameha from my hand. I want to fly. I want to be able to punch somebody across the world. Let me just like explode through the atmosphere into space to fight my enemies, you know? It's just all these really cool things.
I would want to play in a campaign run by you or in a campaign with you because I think we would make a ridiculous anime too. I'm just like imagining like I was like B was watching me probably stare off into space right now as I was like imagining the silly wizard plus Vegeta because like all my characters are silly wizards. I think.
Who's your main inspiration for that? Like at this point, is it just yourself?
No, I really don't. No, yeah, I think it might be like I'm like a super goofball when you get to know me, or if you just watch any of the games that I play or run, like it's like it allows me to be silly, right? RPGs give me that space to be a ridiculous character, and I wonder what are your thoughts about this? Failure in characters, playing characters who aren't supposed to be like perfect heroes.
Did I mention that I like Vegeta?
Yes, yeah, okay.
I love failing. I love it.
Okay.
I'm playing a campaign with my little brother who's a rules lawyer, and I'm having a hard time with it. But I have insisted, let me fail forward. I do not believe that failure ruins your characters, makes them any less than they are. You fail forward and you become more amazing.
I look back at how I used to play, and it used to get really frustrated when I couldn't succeed in D&D, right? Like, basically D&D is like you roll, and either you did it or you didn't do it. And then when I moved over to Powerplay the Apocalypse games, and they had that whole fail forward system, you don't do it, but X happens. You get XP or something else happens. And it kind of like started blowing my mind, because now all I wanted to do was fail because it was making these ridiculous situations. Right. And I also started to not care about, I care about consequences, like if it hurts the group, right? But if it's my character, whatever. Like, bring it on.
Want them to go through the tough stuff, you know?
Yeah. During the quarantine, like the first part of quarantine, we weren't all together. My studio and I weren't all together. My group with Geekspective, we had to play a intermediate game. And we thought it was only going to be like a couple one-shots, but it turned into like 15 or 16 sessions. And within the first session, my character got picked up by a dragon and dropped from the sky.
Oh my god. Did they die?
Yes, and then they met the Satan, and then they made a deal with the devil.
That's amazing, though.
And they came back. But it was amazing, yeah. So have you ever had experiences like that you can remember a story of a character of yours who failed gloriously?
Honestly, no. I fail so regularly. You know?
I feel so much. It's not even memorable.
It all just kind of blends in. That is a really good question. Like, lately I've been doing a lot more... I'm saying this like I've been doing a lot more GMing. That's such a lie. I don't know. It's hard to keep track. Not that I can think of. You know? I don't have any, like, extreme memories of failing. Because, like, to me, it's always, like, fun. So, like, there's never a moment like, heck, like, this is going to be the worst thing ever. Because it always ends up being cool.
Well, then what's a cool, fun moment in something that you've done recently or in Broadswords?
Well, Sundays I play a game called Icons. We call it Powerplay, and it's like a superhero genre. I am an alien robot made out of plastic. Space plastic. It's not bad for the environment. And like my species, my people, all we do is observe. We study, and then we send that data back to our planet, and we collect information. Somewhere along the lines, I crashed to Earth. I've got hardware malfunctioning. My software is on the fritz, so like I can't study anything. And instead, when my hand powers, because I literally wanted a Kamehameha for this character, but I didn't explain it properly to my GM. So now it's like I have a light power, which is still kind of like a key blast, but I have to use like a little bit of science with it, which is weird because I don't ever apply real facts to my games. But nonetheless, so like this power is supposed to like let plants grow, it gives them light, brings them back to life. Instead it destroys. So I've destroyed a few things, and most recently, my poor character found out that there was another one of their species on this planet who works perfectly fine. So, like, Ulez was like, oh, this is so exciting, I could meet another one of my people. I wonder if they're as great as I am. And they are, like, a default version, like, this robot who hasn't undergone, like, trauma and growth and friendship. And then I got them captured. And I felt so bad because I loved them with all of my heart. And it was so cool meeting, like, because we're in season 2 and I'm at, like, season 1 of my character. And I enjoyed that. And I was so attached to them. And then I hecked up and they got captured by these cultists that we can't find information on. And I feel bad. Just like I just wanted to use my powers and it went against me.
Oh, that's... Do you typically get attached to PCs? I think I saw something on Twitter asking, as a GM, are you attached to your NPCs? And then as a player, do you get attached to your PCs?
Yes and yes. I love all of them. I also, I get really emotional sometimes about my characters. Like, I wish there was more conversation about, like, when your character dies, it is okay to mourn. But, like, I also get really sad. The Broadswords, we did a live show in Seattle one time, and there was the enemy who came through a portal named Bob, who was causing chaos. But because I don't believe in combat, I befriended Bob. But Bob was still bad, and then we had to, like, we went through this whole little session, and then we had to kill Bob or send him back to the realm that he came from, but our team opted to kill him. And, like, I was ready to cry in front of all of these people because I just loved the NPC, and I bonded with him, and I just couldn't let that go. Like, yes, my answer is yes.
So for me, it's such a strange thing because I think I'm just now getting to the point where I do start to feel bonded to things, because it used to be before I didn't really experience that. I'm not a person who really gets like super into like even like in fiction, right? In media that exists outside of my own experience.
Okay.
I think maybe that's why I don't participate much in fandom.
I'm going to link that really quickly to fandoms because you understand how wild they can get about their feelings. And if you're not emotionally attached, then you wouldn't feel that way.
Yeah, I don't think I do. Like, I don't know if it's possible for me to feel true, like, emotion for a character. I have characters I like. I have characters I enjoy, but I'm not like people online are like, I will die for my Marvel husband or whatever it is that they're in love with right now. So
that's interesting.
It's interesting. Do you think you have that? Do you have that for yourself?
Yeah. I get far too emotionally attached to things that have no tangible-ness. I love the things that don't need my love because they don't truly exist.
My God. You know? That's the way to put it, huh? Yeah. Okay. Huh. And maybe I just don't allow myself to feel anything that's intangible because I don't know. Whatever. We're getting too weird. Too deep for this podcast. But yeah, so I think it's an interesting thing with PCs. I think I'm starting to feel it now though, just because I've started running a campaign where I'm building worlds.
You've got stakes
right?
in it. And
they're so before I used to play a lot of my PCs very much as one-shotty, kind of like I roll the dice, what happens to them happens to them. I if it's funny for me in the moment, I'm good with it. If it's whatever, it's fine. But now that I'm building a world with my Ryutama campaign and like the Warren, I'm kind of like, oh, I didn't tell you this. I got to play you in the Warren of Pell Grove.
What happened?
The last group really, really wanted hats to give to humans. And so they went to the haberdashery that your character had set up, Pebble. And I got to be like, welcome to the haberdashery. Yes. And your character fitted them for hats. So that's why I like now I'm starting to feel that like
connection,
attachment to things. Yeah. I would be sad if the haberdashery was dismantled.
Right? You have emotional stakes in this now.
Now. Oh my goodness. So yeah, you've gone from playing D&D for the first time ever for a podcast. Now you're basically, like you said, ready to do live shows in front of a lot of people. Do you have advice for any new players or GMs? If they just want to get started.
You're going to feel afraid, and it never stops. I don't know where I assumed that, like, you would stop feeling nervous before you're running a game. You're going to stop worrying about your players criticizing everything. You're going to stop worrying, like, what if I didn't describe all of the tree leaves on that tree that they're walking past? Are they just not going to understand the scene at all? That doesn't stop. But let me be real. As long as you create a setting, a game that is fun for your players, and you have all talked about what your expectations are, it's going to be amazing. And for players, do not stress about not being able to describe how amazing your magic missile is. That is okay. You can literally just say, I just shoot it and it looks purple. because it takes time to be comfortable with yourself and to be comfortable with wanting to describe things. Like it's not a rush. It's not a sprint. Tabletopping, it's a journey. It's a game, and you're supposed to take your time and learn it the way you feel is right.
I agree with all of that, because I also have never stopped being nervous.
I keep waiting and it's never stopping.
There's some funky stuff that happens to my stomach right before a game that I'm not going to share on Tabletop Babble, but you can make those connections yourself.
Gosh, I get really sweaty, like really sweaty. I'm fanning my armpits before a stream, like, don't worry, y'all. Just my armpits need a bit to breathe and we'll be good. My palms are also sweating, but it's fine.
And I think another thing I want just to add on top, the cherry on top of the wholesome, good advice that Bee just gave is, I think it's also okay to ask for reassurance.
100%.
Hey, did you guys have fun? Is usually something that I have to ask after every game.
Please tell me I did okay. Just tell me you liked the trees that I described really well, you know?
Did you laugh? Because I was too busy inside my own head to even notice if that landed or not, or whatever. But anyway, thank you so much for coming on the show. I enjoyed this. I felt very, very good. It felt very, I'm glad to share. I share my feelings, share our thoughts. If people wanted to find you on the interwebs, Bee, where could they do that?
That would be primarily on Twitter as @Bee_Zelda, and that is BEE_ZELDA. If you want to follow me on Instagram, I mostly just post pictures of my dog. Add an extra underscore, so it's @Bee_Zelda_. In terms of podcast, you can find me on the Broadswords, on the One Shot Network. I stream for Roll20, Q Times, Utopia. You're better off just looking up my name. I've done far too many things to keep track of.
Yeah, I'm the same way. Like, too many things to even list off. Well, go find Bee online. And again, thank you so much, Bee, for coming on and chatting with me.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for listening, and I hope you enjoyed the show. You can find me on Twitter @RocketOrca, Kenny as @Volfmir, and John is @CrosswaysGM. Tabletop Babble is part of the Geekspective Network. Go to Geekspective.com to check out all our other shows or follow us on Twitter @Geekspective. Our theme music was provided by the Battle Bards.